Listen, if my camera doesn't do anything like spooky or ectoplasmatic, is it really fall? Hi, welcome back. It's fall, unfortunately. I am one of those people, one of those booktubers, who actually really fucking hates autumn, fall, whatever you want to call it. For once, because I suffer from seasonal depression and fall means the beginning of the end. Second thing, I am an allergic person. Fall is honestly hell on earth for me. Wonderful, isn't it? But fall also means that the leaves are changing, the colors are oranging. I try to represent fall colors, but it's so unbearably hot. What it means is stormy nights. What it means is getting cozy with a book inside your cozy blanket in your cozy armchair or chair. And I'm here to give you some recommendations. I try to split it into categories, like hyper-specific categories that I think are going to be useful because some of these books you've probably never heard of. Let's start with cozy fall books. The ultimate coziness. These are the books that even if it's sunny outside, you can take out on a bench, on a park, and have that cozy yet warm feeling in your chest when you finish them. First one, it's actually a series. I have here the third volume, because I am on a third volume, of the Mirror Visitor series by Christelle Dabo. This is a French light fantasy series that really reminds me in vibes of House Moving Castle. It talks about a girl who lives in a world divided into arcs, like living, breathing cities in which everyone has a different kind of power, but very light. She can pass through mirrors, which is a very rare power, but she can also animate objects. And at the beginning of the first book, she gets betrothed against her will to another person from another arc. He has the power to hurt people with his mind. And it's a political alliance. And together they discover not only that they don't actually hate each other, even though they do for most of the first book, but that there's a conspiracy behind the spiritual gods that rule these arcs. It is interesting, it's full of reveals, and it's magical and luscious. The writing is so vibrant and colorful, and it's the perfect book to start in fall and finish in winter, because there are 4 books and they're pretty chunky. Another series that I actually recommended to you last year in my ultimate fall recommendation guide, I think, but I'm going to recommend it again because it's just the best. It's every Robin Hobbs book, but firstly, the Assassin's Apprentice series. This is the quintessential, I think, high fantasy series for those who like books that are not full of twists and turns. They're a little bit slower, but so character-driven. The characters are 4-dimensional, not only 3-dimensional. This talks about the bastard son of a prince that gets recognized but just as a bastard, and he has the power to communicate with animals, but not only communicate, it's something more. And it's a power that it's really seen as more of a curse, because people from the royalty families, they have the power to communicate with minds with other people, not with animals. And it's the story of this boy growing up and his quest for fate. So sad, so good though. Robin Hobbs knows how to write a gut-wrenching punch to the gut. This is another kind of fantastical recommendation. It's not a fantasy, it's fantastical. I'm going to recommend you When the Angels Left the Old Country by Sasha Lamb. This is a story that it's good omens if you take out the more humoristical, the part with the humor stuff, and you give back in Jewish folklore and history. So you follow a demon and an angel, but you follow them as they are described in Judaism, and they have to rescue a girl. So they go from Balzac, I believe, to America to save this girl who she was implicated into a scheme of some sort. The warmest, tightest hug. This book was written as a mother describing folklore to a child, but like a very intelligent child. The love that this demon and this angel have for each other just transcends the concept of love. It's so good. Such like warm, fuzzy, cozy fall books. This is it. Last book for this category. You might think, this is a summer book. Alice, what are you thinking about? It is not. It's not. I'm going to recommend you I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. This is a book about fandom. It's a book about the fandom culture that surrounds like boy groups, like boy band, like One Direction, K-pop groups. And I loved every minute of it. It's a dual perspective. On one hand, you follow one of the fangirls. She is a Muslim girl who really likes this boy group, The Ark. And on the other hand, you follow one of the boys who is in the band, and he is having like a crisis on all fronts. It is so queer, so quintessentially made for people who are in fandom, and I think this gives the perfect fall book. Cozy, warm, fuzzy feels. You know, it's a stormy night, it's 2 a.m, you're reblogging things on Tumblr like you did when you were 15, and this is the book that encapsulates that feeling. What is a fall book recommendation guide for, if not to give you some dark academia books? Last year I gave you 3 dark academia recommendations you probably never heard of. This time it's a mix. First book, it's a book that it's not necessarily dark academic, emphasis on the academic, but it's dark academia. I'm going to explain. It's Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. This is dark academia in the sense that there is an institution in which these kids in the 1900s London go to learn about their weird and very dangerous powers. They are considered monsters, obviously, in society, and there are people who want to regroup them and teach them about their powers. So the academic part, emphasis, it's on the powers, so they're learning about that. So it's kind of like an academic setting in that sense. It is very dark, but the writing, my god, luscious, gothic, atmospherical, so cool. Just, you can feel like the dark, Londony, foggy night when reading this book, and it's like so cool. And then I have another book that is a dark academia book, but like a subgenre of the dark academia. It's more like a thrillery dark academia. Ace of Spades. Ace of Spades, it's a queer dark academic novel, and it's one of those stories that you maybe heard before. Somebody in this very rich people academic setting is divulging everybody's secrets, and you follow a mean bitch alpha girl and this poor kid who's there on a scholarship, and they're trying to find the culprit because this culprit is divulging their secrets. Very fast-paced, but in a way that you focus on the details, which I think all thrillers should do. It's also very queer, and I loved it. It was so good. The pacing was perfect. And then I have another subgenre of the dark academia books. It's the weird dark academia, which is my favorite. So, if you've never heard of Vita Nostra, how to explain that, it's going to be hard. Vita Nostra talks about a girl who discovers she has these weird powers, which I cannot even describe. So she gets recruited to go to this academy in which she has to learn, the cost is her life, how her power works and the secret behind what she is. Like, physically what she is. If you're a fan of philosophy, or if you are an English major or like a linguistic major, you're going to love this book. It talks about philosophy a lot. It's more like a slower paced book, but the reveals are so twisty, and it talks about linguistics in a way that you won't expect it. This is like when you study philosophy and you go through philosopher's phase to enlightenment. This is the book equivalent of that. It is so innovative, so never heard before, and this is a series. Why are you not translating the rest? But don't worry, this is auto-conclusive. Like, it could be a standalone, but there are other books, like companion books. Why are you not translating them? So this concludes the Dark Academia for this year, but I have 3 more categories. First of this trifecta is books for a stormy night. These are the books that you read when it's storming, pouring outside with the sound of the rain, maybe like an ambiance on YouTube. The first one that I'm going to recommend is a book that you want to read when you don't actually want to hear the rain, because your tears and sobs are going to be louder. Trust me, much louder. I'm going to recommend Young Mungo. I have an entire vlog in which I read this book. One of the most painful yet beautiful experiences of my life while reading a book. It is dual timeline in which you follow the lives of this kid called Mungo, who lives in the 90s Ireland in the period of time where the war between Catholic and Protestant was still rampant. You follow his growth in the past timeline, and then suddenly in the future timeline you are in the mountains where Mungo is camping with these two weird alcoholic dudes. Trigger warnings, heavy trigger warnings, go look them up because there are a ton, but this is a picture of an era. It's also like queer suffering at its best, but it's not queer suffering in which everybody dies at the end. It's queer suffering in which you understand what it was like back then to be queer, to be different in any aspect. It was hell on earth, but beautiful, incredibly beautiful. I had snot dripping down my nose, but I was still kind of in awe of the writing of this book. Then I have a series, which Netflix made a series, like a TV show from the series, and then cancelled it on season 1, even though it was very good, and I'm still salty about it. So the perfect way to be in solidarity with the actors is to read the books. This is Lockwood & Co. This is the first volume, The Screaming Staircase by Jonathan Stroud. I love Jonathan Stroud's books. Every Jonathan Stroud book can be a fall book recommendation. You're in London again, but this time you have an epidemic of ghosts, and it's kind of like a steampunk-ish novel in which only kids can see the ghost, but the manifestations are real and physical, so they have to go ghost hunting. You follow the tiniest ghost hunting shop in London, whose boss is obviously Lockwood. So good! So it's so funny, but also full of secrets and like gothic atmosphere. So fucking good! It is more middle grade to young adult, but still fantastical. Now we go to sci-fi, baby, and if you're talking sci-fi and fun books, we are talking about Red Rising. One of my favorite series of all time for a reason. So we are in a future in which we colonize the whole solar system, and we divided, or the rich divided, the population into castes, and they go by color, and they all do a different job. The golds are the ones that are in power. They are genetically made to be stronger and smarter. And we follow Darrow, who is a red, so it means that he's a miner in Mars. Is possibly the lowest of the low. His girlfriend gets killed alongside a lot of other miners, and he encounters people who are like, do you want to become a gold? Like physically become a gold through procedures that are very dangerous? And he's like, obviously yes, I'm going to destroy them. And this is the series. It is so clever. I love a protagonist who is clever, and it's fucking time bending. Like my mind was going through loops to try to understand, but it's so it's like sci-fi but elevated. And the military tactics, everything makes so much sense, which it's a novelty in books. Another one of my favorite series of all time. This could technically classify also for dark academia. It's called Hive by Mark Bolden. This is the second book. The first book is just Hive, which stands for Higher Institute of Villainous Education. Kids who have the attitude for becoming future supervillains get brought to this school on an island, and they cannot escape until they have finished their course. So they learn, again, military tactics, how to be the best thieves, how to be cunning and vicious and rule the world from the shadows. But our protagonist and his friends our protagonist Otto, they don't want to be on that island. They don't want to be villains. So every year they try to escape in another manner. And there are secrets, and it's so well crafted and ingenious how these kids want to go out in the world without a care in the world, but they're destined to be villain. Another series that could be good for it is like a light fantasy. It's like magical realism more. It's the Book of Beginning series. The first book, it's called Emerald Atlas. This is the last book. This is called the Darkness Atlas. You follow these three brother and sister whose parents gets killed on a Christmas morning, and they only leave behind a book. I had to put my hair up because it's unbearable how hot it is. These three kids follow the traces of these books, because there are three books, they only have one, and they discover that these three books may lead them to whoever did what they did to their parents. And every kid discovers that they are the secret treasurer of these books, which have an enormous power within them. It's a fantastical adventure. It's more of a young adult book, but it has that charm that you find in very few fantasy books, especially the ones that are not set in a fantasy world. This is set in our world, but there is the fantastical aspect of the books, this unfathomable, all-powerful being that it's their nemesis, and it's, I don't know, it just has that wonderful, fantastical charm. Now, if you know me, if you know my channel, you would know that I really like spooky books, but I don't like scary books. I don't like the gore. I don't like to be up all night thinking, oh my god, is there something in my bed? Spooky books though, I love them. So this is the category of spooky books that are not scary. Starting off with a classic, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is the story of a boy who grows up in a cemetery. Reasons unknown, you'll soon discover them. Neil Gaiman, I think it's the king of the spooky yet not scary books, and the atmosphere of the cemetery, it's so spooky. He can talk to ghosts, and he was adopted by ghosts in the cemetery. Somebody's out to get him with a knife. Another one of my favorite subgenres of books is short story collection. I usually hate, but horror short story collections are my favorite, especially if they're all connected. And I have here the perfect incarnation of that. This is Half-Minute Horrors. This is a bunch of short story collections from Neil Gaiman, Michael Connelly, Lemony Snicket, Jared Spinelli, and many, many more. These are very, very quick horror stories. Some of them are actually kind of scary, but most of them are just spooky. And you can read them aloud at parties. You can read them aloud to your dog, just like I did, to not feel alone with this book. It's perfect even if you're not alone. And the last one is one of my favorite thrillery spooky books. It's called Black Rabbit Summer by Kevin Brooks. One of those stories that, again, maybe you've heard before, but not in this flavor. During a torrid summer, a group of kids are roaming the streets. They do not know what to do, it's too hot. Then suddenly one of the most reclusive members of the group disappears. And nobody knows why. Or at least the protagonist Pete wants to know why Raymond, this other kid, disappeared. He was one of his best friends. But nobody wants to talk about him. Nobody, the adults, the kids, nobody wants to talk about Raymond. And something happened and Pete knows it. You know, thrillery, suspenseful, perfect for, you know, those evenings where you need a little bit of thrill, but not too spooky, not too scary. Last but not least, I can hear the people saying, but I don't want to read a book. I have too much to do, school's starting up again. I want to read a comic, a graphic novel. I don't have much time, but I still want the fall feeling. I hear you. These are the graphic novels for a cool evening under a blanket. If you want something more fantastical, but also fantastical in the weird sense, I have here Super Mutant Magic Academy by Gillian Tamaki. This started off, I think, online as a series of short comics that all interconnected with the same characters, and they describe the life of a young girl at a school in which there are strange creatures as students. Everybody has a power, or they're either like a monster, and she has a personality that is a little bit grating. She maybe has a crush on her girlfriend, like a girlfriend, who has a crush in turn on another boy, and it's their story. There's also like fate and magic and wizards. And I have the author for fall graphic novel recommendations. The author. That is, of course, Tilly Weldon. I have here On a Sunbeam. This is a sci-fi story about self-discovery. It's a little bit chunky, but it's done with so much care and the colors are stunning. I think this is one of the few graphic novels which I just cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of like recognition. This is a very deep self-discovery story with sci-fi aspects. So they're on a ship and they're trying to go to a place on this like very banged up ship, and it's queer. It talks about identity and gender, and it's just wonderful. This was my new ultimate fall recommendation guide. I hope you found something to your likings. I hope you're going to read some of these books. If you have any other recommendation, please leave them in the comments. And also if you've read any of these books, please tell me, leave them in the comments. And I don't know, leave a like, do whatever you want, do the YouTube stuff. Also, if you want to connect with me, I have some socials down below. I'm most active on TikTok, but also my Goodreads. I review every single book that I read. And I think I'll see you in the next video, which will be maybe a cozy fall vlog. See you then. Bye!